thank you, Charlene, and thank you, Erica, for doing such an awesome job. I can't follow you up, in any good way because you're amazing at doing facilitation and leading us through these questions. But we're going to transition now from discussion of the film and general considerations of code bias in our society to a focused discussion of how this relates to our particular colleges, the College of Information and Computer Sciences and the College of Engineering. So we're lucky to have with us the leaders of these colleges, Dean Laura Haas of the College of Information and Computer Sciences, and Dean Sanjay Raman of the College of Engineering. We do some research in our colleges that is, sorry, that was a alarm going off. We do some research that is related to facial recognition and artificial intelligence. Um, but we also have a large number of faculty members, and graduate students who don't do that type of research. A lot of research is done that is not related to facial recognition and artificial intelligence. But I think it's important to bring up that what Shalini brought up, which is that these biases are present in a lot of the sciences. So she mentioned how it was present in the health professions when we're looking at maybe COVID-19, but doing research on a small section of the population that isn't necessarily representative of our overall population. This year, I had students in a engineering service learning class who were exploring critical thinking, and they brought up that some objects that are they're genderless objects are given the term male and female, like a male plug, a female plug. And the student mentioned like, why are we reinforcing this gender bias and this binary bias when there are some of us who don't adhere to that. Another student brought up the use of the term master slave in mechanical engineering, referring to control systems and electrical engineering, and whether like we should look for those terms to be changed. So we do have these biases in broader range of computer science and engineering. And I'm thinking of some questions that one of the new faculty members, Jessica Boake, Boake, sorry, I totally destroyed your name, Jessica.
No problem. It's blotchy, but
Boake.
it's yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So Jessica, you mentioned it was an amazing question. Could you repeat it if you remember? I wrote it down.
I can repeat it. Let me just find it. Um, so I guess the first part of my question wasn't asked, so I'll just read the whole thing. But so she mentioned that the law is one way to protect privacy and deal with some issues of the systemic bias and privacy. But from my perspective, the law is slow and it depends on the people who may not understand the technology. And so my question is about how about the people creating this technology, and specifically for us as an engineering college, like what is our role in training the next crop of engineers, data scientists, and users of AI? And I speculate that maybe we should incorporate more issues of bias and social justice more prominently in our curriculum.
So I think that is a perfect segue into our fireside chat now with Dean Laura Haas and Dean Sanjay Raman. Um,
Yeah.
so maybe we could start with those questions.
Do you want me to go, Laura, or do you want to go?
I'm
What?
happy to talk about where we are with this. I mean, I totally agree with you, Jessica. I believe this has to be front and center in our education. We have a couple of classes in computer science that focus on ethical issues, ranging from a seminar to our junior year writing class is all about social issues and focuses on that. We also have a small group of faculty and students, undergraduates, who are working on I guess you'd call it an ethics simulator, where you can plug in a scenario and kids can actually walk through that scenario and think about the different choices they could make as they're going through this, and have to face the sort of the consequences, or more, how can they gather more information. We're trying to give them the tools so that when they find themselves building some piece of software, they will actually think about how do, what are the things I should look out for? And if I start seeing something that bothers me, who do I go talk to? How do I make the world a better place? Our hope is eventually, the reason we're going through this simulator thing is that you should be able to plug in units that are appropriate for every class. Because I don't think a one shot, you go to one class, it talks about this, and you forget about it for the rest of your undergraduate career is sufficient. And so, being tech people, they came up with a higher tech solution than perhaps I might have, but the idea was to give the faculty members a tool so that all they have to do is sort of write some of the scenario prompts, and they can adapt this to fit nicely into their course. So what you get in an AI course versus a software engineering course versus a machine vision course could be similar but different kinds of scenarios. So we believe in this very strongly. And I loved what Shalini was saying about, I think we would summarize that as, with great power comes great responsibility. When I talk to our students, I always talk about their superpowers. And I always tell them you have to use those for good. And that's what we want to arm you with. And that's what we want to teach you by the time you graduate. Are we there yet? No. But do we have the right direction? Heck yes. Sorry, Sanjay, you go.
I think we're very much on the same wavelength, Laura. I will just say that what we're kind of calling that in College of Engineering, and we're also not there yet. We're just in the early stages of thinking about this. But our vision for the engineering curriculum at Amherst, and frankly for the engineering profession writ large, is the term inclusive design, or the concept inclusive design, which is we need to instill in our graduates, and we need to do that in every class, in every discipline within engineering computer science, how when you design systems, you need to do that in an inclusive and holistic way, so that we're intercepting the bias process before they get out into industry and start building these systems, and that we're trying to instill a framework of design that takes into account diverse users, diverse communities that are interacting with these technologies. The old simple story, which is a relatively old story, is the seatbelt, the car seatbelt, right? So when the early days of designing car seatbelts, there was a male model. There was a 50% median size male model, weight and height, and that was the crash test dummy that was used to design seatbelts. And as a result, and that was in the 50s or earlier, there weren't that as many women driving cars, et cetera. So that the viewpoint was, well, we design it for the average male, and it'll be perfectly fine. And as a result of that, the deaths and injuries to women drivers was markedly higher, and those issues, we need to build in those design principles at the very early stages. So when we're going out in industry, we're designing systems in this inclusive way. And frankly, that problem is even continuing to exist today, because they're still using crash test dummies. Now they have a woman crash test dummy of a certain size, and a male crash test dummy is a certain size, children crash test dummies is a certain size, but they're not taking into account internal biology and biomechanics that are different, right? So there are those issues persist even today. So I think we really need to rethink the engineering curriculum so that when we teach design, we are doing that with these inclusive principles in mind. In the College of Engineering this semester, in part in response to the Black Lives Matter and anti-racism drive, over the course of the summer, we started a diversity, equity, and inclusion curriculum challenge to our faculty to try to pull into at least one lesson during the course of the semester a concept like this. Okay, and we're getting all sorts of ideas and all sorts of ways of bringing in equity and inclusion into the diversity, equity, and inclusion into various engineering classes. So it's a first step. What we really need to do is fundamentally restructure the curriculum so that we are in every class talking about inclusive design. And so I just want to totally agree with you, Laura, that you can't just go and park it in a single ethics class or a single sort of DEI gen ed class and assume that you've solved the problem. We really have to do it holistically throughout the curriculum. So hopefully that that at least directionally is our vision, and we're not there yet, as Laura said, and lots more work for all of you in the College of Engineering and CICS to do to help us get there.
And I love the curriculum challenge idea. I hope you're taking notes, Erica. Let's steal that.
Always.
And we'd be happy to share. I think we've got a big box folder with a lot of stuff in it, and we'd be happy to share.
Great.
Always. I love it. And I never realized that I would understand why my seatbelt is horrible in the car that I ride in with my husband's car. It's horrible. It's a horrible seatbelt. But thank you for bringing me into this, Sanjay. I really appreciate it. You have made this amazing. So, and I mean, Laura, you rock too, but this was really a great coming out story. I appreciate it. So since we got started on this, right? When we talk about this, and you just talked a little bit about bias and about the history. The question is, can you elaborate on the notion of data is destiny? When Joy mentions that algorithms work based on historical context, what do you see that as in your vision and in your different fields?
Well,
Do you want to go first? Do you want me to?
You would like to. It's your turn. So.
Well, in a sense, it's a follow-on to the previous question, because I think that the designers of these systems need to have diverse and holistic data sets. Let's just in the machine vision or in the AI context, what you're training these systems with needs to be as diverse as possible and as rich as possible, so it doesn't drive the solutions to this white male solution, right? So that in order to get there, we really have to teach our engineers and our computer scientists to do that, and that they need to vet the data sets from that framework of inclusivity. It reminds me of the comment about building a quote unquote FDA or a regulatory framework for AI and computer vision. And if and I'm not absolutely not an expert in this, but in the certification process for pharmaceuticals and for medical devices, there are standards for the cohorts that participate in those trials, and they have to be statistically representative of the populations that are going to be interacting with those technologies. And there's high standards for that, so that a certain clinical trial for a particular pharmaceutical or medical device will not be authorized if it does not have the right statistically representative population. So we have to do something similar, I think, in this context. And maybe I'll hand it off to Laura at that.
Well, that was a beautiful answer, Sanjay. I will just go back to the question. Elaborate on why data is destiny. Data records the past. That is what data does. It's about something that has happened. Some parts of our world are more observable than others. So, data is destiny is a really rich and difficult topic, because we've talked about Black versus white. We've talked about men versus women here. Rich versus poor. We have a lot more information about some rich people now, because they're the ones that ran out and bought certain kinds of technology, than we do about poor people. And so we gear some technologies and some economic things to those rich people. And yeah, as we all know, an increasing percentage of our economy and our people are poor, or on the poorer side of the spectrum. So it's a matter of what are you going to examine, as Sanjay so beautifully said, but also what have you been examining? And the problem is that it's very hard to make progress in science without data. And it's a lot of times we get pushed to make decisions and to make progress. Look at COVID. You know, if the data you can get quickly is rich white people's data, are we going to not use that? No. But you'd hope the FDA, at least, or an organization like that, could scope what you were doing to that data. But then, wait, those people are getting preferential treatment. So I mean, there's some really hard ethical issues here when you look at data and whose data is captured and how. So I think, you know, ultimately, when we talk about data being destiny, what I'd like to see is that we instrument all areas of society equally. Like all hospitals should be capturing the same data. All trials should, you know, all schools should, you know, and if we were doing that instrumentation properly so that we got that data more uniformly, that would help. We also should use it the other way around. If we're not surveilling rich people's neighborhoods about who's, you know, got wild parties going and smoking pot or whatever, we shouldn't be surveilling, you know, poorer neighborhoods for that, right? Let alone Black, white, Hispanic, etc. So I think, you know, it's a matter of first, before laws, policies, right? What are our policies and what are we aiming for? And then what are the laws that have to back up those policies? And then what are the enforcement mechanisms? What are the agencies or whatever that will make those things live and breathe and ensure that our technology lives up to our standards?
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much, both of you, for fantastic responses. And I didn't pay Laura for this, but this is the next question. In the film Coded Bias, it is said that the future is already here. It's just not evenly distributed. This implied that not only access to technology, but access to resources were prioritized and given to the wealthy. What can CICS and COE do to promote more equitable distribution of resources in our society at large, and to ensure that our students are able to have more equitable access to technology in the future? What can we do?
So beyond the education response that we already gave you, because I don't want us to spend the whole time on the education side. Obviously, that's a huge piece of it. I think our faculty, especially our AI faculty that are very focused on data, are doing a few things to try and help with this. One is to make sure that the data sets they're using come from better determined populations. Another is a study that faculty members Yuri Brun and Alexandra Miliu did to enable software testing for bias. So that's a way, you know, I think Shalini made the point that Amazon was trying to do the right thing when they managed to screw up their hiring totally. Because I mean, they were well-intentioned, right? And I think the same thing happens with banks, with a number of other organizations. And today they have no way of knowing when the software they're using is biased. So that's something that we can do to be helpful there. We can all be active outside of our discipline, though, because it's not just a technology thing. I think we all have to engage better with Congress and our national leaders to try and get the voice of technologists who understand the technology better heard. I'll put in a shout out here in case there's any faculty and others and staff and others on the phone who would like to take advantage of this, but the Computing Research Association does an annual, what they call a fly-in. So they bring people down to Washington and bring them around and have them talk to policymakers about various issues of the day. So it's almost like a day as a lobbyist that you can do that. They also run a really nice leadership training institute. I'd have to look up the name, but if you're interested, let me know, where people can go learn how to advocate in Washington, how to talk to Congress and to the senators in ways that will help them to listen, how to talk to the agencies, etc. And so you can be it's a something or other fellow and get some training, and then you can be part of the solution. So I'll stop there. Sorry. I don't know if I actually answered your question, but I was very excited to make that.
I guess just to riff off of that a little bit, I think one of the challenges we have in our American democratic society is that very, very few of our legislators and political leaders are scientists or engineers. I mean, I don't know. There's something like 5 or 7 in Congress, something on engineers. I don't know about computer scientists. I think that the medical profession's a bit more represented. So, I mean, I think that there is, I think to the advocacy point of view, I mean, we absolutely should be going forward and speaking with our political leaders about the ethical uses of technology and representing the sort of the user community versus the corporate interests of in the technology. But there's no substitute for being in the room, and I think the more that we can advance folks with STEM backgrounds into political leadership, I think it'll make a lot of difference. I mean, I think there is a reason why Germany has been successful in ways that we have not. They have a chancellor who's a physicist, and that I think that makes a difference. That's not an easily solved problem. I mean, it's going to take a generation for folks to start thinking about that. But the way to start is to be a congressional fellow. I mean, the various engineering professional societies, IEEE, for example, has a congressional fellows program. There are the ASCE, American Society for Engineering Education, does the similar thing to what Laura was just describing in terms of congressional visits, and that is a way to get that voice going. I guess I'll make one other point, which is that I think that obviously there's a lot in our society that's driven by business interests and the growth of sort of the needs of corporations and their and that obviously creates jobs, and that's what our students care about, and we want to obviously we want to enable that. But I think our corporate leaders really need to start thinking about these things ethically as well. And there's lots of examples that I don't need to go into of the corporate sort of viewpoints that have maybe influenced how certain technological decisions have not necessarily been great for our country. So that's I don't know what the solution to that is, but be ethical and become a CEO, I guess, become an entrepreneur, start a company, be the next Google, but don't lose sight of the ethics and this the societal social justice viewpoint when you do that.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you also talking about representation, because as I sit here and I'm staring at my screen, I have 4 boxes, and we all represent different pieces of representation that were not evident on our campus a little bit over a year ago. So I see that we are making strides, and it's just a beautiful sight. I just wanted to get that in there before I give you your last question, that it is absolutely beautiful to see all of the different faces in these boxes that are represented here, because we weren't here before. And now the last question. And I didn't pay Sanjay to lead us into this question. I'm just putting that out there. I just want everybody to know. It seems like many initiatives are being set up as an argument to use technology for equity rather than efficiency. Efficiency. How can we win an argument that says that we're going to use these for equity? That's the question I was given.
So, all right, well,
There's a lot of thinking there. There's a lot of thinking. Pick it apart, right?
I got to read that one while he was talking. I will say that, you know, companies are motivated by the profit line, which has a lot to do with efficiency. I think the way we win the argument that equity has to be part of the picture is by appealing to that exact same bottom line. That is, I mean, I worked for IBM for 36 years before I saw the error of my ways and came to the educational side of the house. But it wasn't an error in the sense that IBM has for years and years been saying that the audience, the purchasers of their technology are diverse. And if you can't appeal to that audience because you don't understand what they're looking for, I'm not going to say IBM is perfect for this, but they at least have been saying for years and years that that was how they make more money. And they've been able to back that up over time as they promoted leadership within and so on, that in fact, you know, having more diverse representation higher up, having this design thinking and understanding your audience, and as Sanjay was saying earlier, user-centered design helped make better products, helped them make more money. I think there are a lot of studies out there that we can appeal to and point to that show that you win when you're more equitable, that you actually can make more money and do better things. And so I don't see that the two have to be, that we have to think about it as it's efficiency or equity. I think efficiency and equity can actually be stronger for most companies.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. And I will just add one other a slightly different way of framing it, which is risk. So companies they obviously want to make money. They do things so that they're efficient and their profit profit is larger, but they need to avoid risk. So in companies, particularly, I mean, healthcare and biomedical devices and pharmaceuticals are a classic example of this, right? So, they're also, they cannot deliver a product that is going to cause harm, that is going to kill people, because they're going to end up having tons of lawsuits and fines and things like that. So in the same way, if there's a regulatory framework for the sake of argument, AI, that has some teeth, that presents a risk to companies, then they are going to be incentivized to to design in a way that they minimize that risk. And so that is going to be ultimately up to Congress and political leadership to figure out what that framework is. And we absolutely have a lot of difficulty getting this right over decades. But I think the safety of the customer, the safety of the user of the technology has to also be very foremost in the developers, in the company's mindset, right? And one way to achieve that is through some form of regulation, as is done in pharmaceuticals or medical devices. So that's a bit of maybe of a punitive way of looking at it, and not as illustrious, I guess, but that's but I think risk management is another way to frame it.
Thank you so much. Thank you for that response. And it's very funny how you brought us back to where we started. We started talking about algorithms, and we started to talking about this historical data. And then you talked about that data being used in these instances. It was a full circle, and I appreciate both of you today for this discussion. I really, really do. It was a powerful discussion, and I am very sorry to say that we have 1 minute and I will end on time. So let's all give a round of applause, unmute yourself, say hello, say thank you to this wonderful, wonderful fireside chat with no fireplace. So
Erica, if I could just say one. So there's a
Sure.
few more questions that
Sure.
are in the chat, and they're really powerful questions. So I just encourage people to read those questions and think about it as food for thought, since we don't have time to answer them. One of my thought was really powerful is, how do we reach out to people who may be engaged in bias, but they feel like, oh, I'm not doing any bias, and that's a real tough question. So food for thought. And thank
yes,
you,
this
Lara,
sounds wonderful.
Erica.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah.
You run a great fireside chat. I will
With
share-
or without a fire.
I'm very happy to share a stage with you anytime.
Yeah. Thank you for organizing. This was fantastic, and we need to build on this. This is a fantastic
Yeah.
discussion.
We really do. So look out for the next one.
Okay.
Next semester, we'll have to figure out how to make it happen.
All
Stay
right.
engaged, everybody, and fight that bias. Yeah.
Yeah.